Welcome to another episode of the International Classroom Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Gray, and today we have a guest joining us from Helsinki, Finland, Tomi Kauppinen. Now, Tomi is a modern-day Renaissance man. He's an artist, an author, scientist, researcher, and he's the head of online learning at Aalto University. With his fingers in many pies, he's passionate about designing innovative learning experiences that cross borders and disciplines. Now, in this episode, we're going to get into the world of education across the Nordic countries and Germany, exploring how different educational systems can shape teaching and learning. And Tomi shares his insights on the power of information visualization in education and how it can transform data into meaningful stories that enhance learning outcomes. So, whether you are an educator, a student, or someone who's passionate about the future of learning, this episode is packed with insights that will inspire you to think differently about education. So, sit back, relax, and join us as we explore how to make the world a more human place through innovative education with Tomi Kauppinen. Well, Tomi, thank you ever so much for joining me on the International Classroom Podcast today. Whereabouts in the world do we find you?
Helsinki, Finland. I mean, more specifically Espoo, which is like next to Helsinki, but it's easier to say Helsinki because everybody knows Helsinki and nobody knows Espoo. Yeah.
And so one of the things I've started doing this season, rather than introducing guests, I'm allowing them to introduce themselves. So how would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers today?
Yeah, I'm like this kind of Renaissance person. So I would like to consider myself being an artist, head of Aalto Online Learning. So we do augmented virtual reality, MOOCs, videos, everything you can expect. I'm also an author. I'm also a scientist, researcher. So I'm all over the place.
So we have a saying, it's like you've got your finger in many pies.
Oh,
so
yeah,
it's probably
totally.
Definitely one of those. And obviously when we were talking or looking up obviously some of the educational work that you have done, obviously you go between Finland and Germany. So you're experiencing like two different education systems. So I'm curious, how's that shaped your approach to your education and how you teach?
It has shaped everything. So I have an affiliation both in Finland and Germany. And when I started as a postdoc in Germany, my great boss said that, hey, Tomi, you have all the freedom you can imagine to shape and design your learning or teaching, but also all the support you can imagine. And that changed everything. So I was, really using this freedom to create courses that I would like to enjoy as a student. And but then I also got a lot of support from there. Yeah.
So what's the view to, like we see, because Finland is renowned for its take on education and the educational system as a whole. How does Germany's compare to it when you're working with German students?
So in both places, both in Aalto University and also in Germany, in the University of Münster, we have very international students. But of course, there is this flavor of like local students as well. So I would say that here in Finland, we have almost no hierarchy, which can be challenging or also like a good thing. In Germany, I would say it's much more hierarchy and appreciation of the professors. So I think those are the biggest differences, I would say.
Okay, fantastic. And one of the things obviously you're doing at the moment is you're designing a learning for the Nordic countries. There's this really interesting project, or it sounds like. So just to clarify, when we say Nordic countries, can you give us an example of the countries that's involving?
Yeah, that's a new project we have. So it's Norway, University of Bergen, then Denmark, University of Aarhus from there, Stockholm University, obviously from Sweden, then Iceland, Reykjavik University, and then Aalto University from Finland.
Fantastic. So when we talk about learning, obviously it's something you're obviously very passionate about. You're obviously doing a lot of work in. Break it down, simplify it for our listeners. What for you is learning?
Learning is a few things. So first of all, it's remembering something. It's, I think, next level is like understanding something more deeply. And then thirdly, to be able to do something with your understanding or with your remembering some facts or skills. So these are the three main levels, I would say. But then above these are, of course, the skill to be able to make others learn skills, mindsets based on your own attitudes and mindsets and skills.
And obviously from this side, we're talking about the international classroom, and you've already mentioned this in terms of you've got international students. There's this perception that obviously different students from different countries have preferred learning styles or learn differently or think learning is different. And what's been your experience of that? Do you think learning is a global thing? Is it, learning is international? Or are you seeing that students from around different areas in these Nordic countries, across Germany, do they have different learning styles? Do they have different preferences of how they like to learn?
I think there is more like, first of all, I think there are more similarities than differences between students. That's for sure. So I think we should focus more on the similarities. And one similarity that I've realized is that people prefer a learning style where learning actually matters to the learner, so that they can, for example, use class as a channel for their creativity, for their values, and also for learning from others by using this class as a channel. Of course, there are some, I don't know if they are really preferences, but they're also what people are used to. So obviously, many, let's say if I have students from Asia, many of them are very used to having super long, like power distance to the professor. So professor is somebody who is out there on the podium and cannot be questioned about. So, but I don't think that is their preference really. None of the Asian students have said that this is exactly their preference. They have said exactly the opposite, that they really love working with their peers in group discussions and having less hierarchy.
Fantastic. What about their approaches then to technology? So if learning is universal and sort of the things they like to do, are you also seeing that their approach to digital innovation and learning through digital means is also the same?
Yes and no. So first of all, there are a lot of limitations. Not all countries or not all cities, places are at the same level. Internet connection is simply works in many Western countries and in many Asian countries, but then suddenly doesn't work in Africa, most parts of Africa, also Latin America, some parts in Asia also doesn't work that well. So we have to understand that even if the devices themselves could be exported to different places, but then what if the internet connection is not the same? So yeah, I mean, and also a lot of gadgets and devices are manufactured in Asia, but then local people perhaps cannot afford there to buy themselves these devices to be able to use those for their own education.
Yeah, and that kind of leads us into one of the other initiatives you're involved in, this DigiEduHack.
Oh, yeah.
And so super curious, I'm going to allow you to explain that to us. Like, what is that? What's the purpose of that?
Yeah, that's a great initiative by European Commission. It started 2019, Digital Education Hackathon. Basically, the idea is there to have simultaneously tens and tens of hackathons, challenges that people host, organizations host, and then invite participants to solve those challenges. And challenges can be like, for example, how do we educate with digital technologies people who don't afford buying devices or cannot afford buying devices? So this is just one of the challenges. Or challenge can be also, how do we create kind of a digital layer on top of a museum experience where people with disabilities can still enjoy for example, if they have problems with their eyesight, can still enjoy the museum experience. So the challenges can be like basically anything that we and hosts identify in the world.
Okay, so when people hear the word hackathon or hack, it kind of gets them worried because they associate it with that. But actually, when you're talking about hackathons, what are the types of things the kids are doing? So you mentioned obviously some of the challenges, but what does that look like? What are the types of activities? What are the things they're going to be doing with the digital component? And why do we call it like a hack or hackathon?
Yeah, that's a great question, because quite traditionally hackathons were like computer science geeks gathering around and programming, hacking overnight, right? But nowadays hackathon is so much more. It's like business people, sociologists, philosophers, of course also computer scientists, like everybody, designers as well, artists, can come together and then look at the system, look at anything like a organization, and then think how they can hack it to be better. Education system of a whole country, let's put it that way. I mean, of course you can still program and code something, but perhaps that is not the best hack. And when you ask about activities, so we believe in design thinking, this kind of design-based approaches where, for example, first we let teams identify like what is the actual problem or set of problems within this challenge. And then with the mentors, we help them to like split down the problems to something that actually can be solved. And in 24 hours, which is not that long time, right?
No. It's a very short time. So when obviously you started, when's the next event taking place?
So it's early November. So it's like a 10 days period. I think it was November 4 to November 14. I have to check the dates. No, November 7 to November 17. I think it was this year. And then we have a main stage event on November 20. Which is basically gathering around all the different solutions together with the stakeholders. Our own challenge will take place November 14 to 15 with Heureka Science Museum in Finland. So it's a collaboration between Aalto University and Science Museum.
Okay. And in terms of then the age of the students, I'm just getting my head around this because obviously university-based or higher education, but is it specifically for students within higher education, or is it open to students of any particular age?
Open to anybody, everybody, yes. School kids, high school students, company people, startups, anybody, basically.
Okay, fantastic. And with that, kind of looks a little bit around, obviously, we're curious, for me as an outsider looking in terms of sort of this approach that you've got and trying to understand a little bit about the Finnish approach before we talk more about, obviously, your work in digital and visualization as well. But this approach that you've got there, this Finnish approach of being student-centered, do you think, I'm curious in terms of, obviously, it gets worldwide recognition, and you've gone through the system, you work within that system. Do you think it's deserved in terms of, it's lauded over by a lot of people? Is it really that good? What makes it so good?
That's a great question. I think what might make it good is that we all the time ourselves realize that there is a lot of challenges that we want to fix. You see, so we are not happy with it ourselves, right? So, if I think of myself going through it, I think I was happy about many things, but also I found many challenging points. What I was really happy about was that I had splendid educators, most of them, who were really themselves. So there was not really this kind of power distance, but they were like honest human beings. I think that was something that I really valued. And also what I saw that they really appreciated if some student knew kind of more than them, they were happy to give that person like a assistant educator role in the classroom. So those I think I really, really appreciate. But then of course, some challenges I think included then and perhaps even now is that it's very hard to have either very homogeneous classrooms or very mixed classrooms. So if you have a homogeneous classroom, perhaps you don't learn from other perspectives, but if you have very different levels of students, then some people are more loud than others, kind of teasing others, and this kind of challenges exist still.
Okay. It's good to know. But yeah, because from our outsiders, we hear a lot, and this is the part of this mini series that we're doing. Obviously, we want to dive into as many international classrooms as possible, and obviously Finland being one of them is regarded and renowned throughout the education global sphere. So it's good to get a little bit of insight from yourself into that and how it goes from the classroom and carries on into the university setting as well. But one of the things I always want to talk to you about is your specialty, which is to do with this information visualization. And there might be people out there that have not come across this, don't know what it is. So if you were to explain to someone about it, how would you sell information visualization in education?
Yeah. So first of all, we have to understand that there is a lot of data around, a lot of basically observations. I think it's useful to think of data as observations by some human beings, by organizations. And then the question is, okay, why do people gather this data set? It can be like data set about like how happy were people about a certain class or MOOC, how well did they learn something, right? So exam results. So all different kinds of data about also buildings, about classrooms, about class sizes and so on. Now the big question is like, how do we make sense of all that data? Here is what the information visualization promises to do, exactly to make sense of the data. So first of all, bringing the data to information level, which is like a bit more usable kind of chunk or way to present information. And of course, information visualization can bring this even to a next level where suddenly all that data starts to look like a story, almost like a movie that you can watch and enjoy. You can perhaps play around with the visualization, filter, sort things, select like to focus on certain building, classroom, country, anything, and then understand what is going on, make better decisions. If you are a decision maker, or if you are a citizen, you can point out like issues with the visualizations to decision makers, or just understand like how perhaps you could learn better. There is a lot of this kind of how to learn kind of movement. So I think this visualization approach can certainly help in that.
So let's see if we can go through like a quick example. For me, so a science teacher, I've got my class of 22 students and they've done an assessment. I've got lots of data. I've got their predicted data. I've got what they should be achieving data. How can I apply then information visualization to my class data to help me make sense of it? And also then how does that go into helping me with my students to make better progress? Now, for the parents listening, are you feeling overwhelmed by all the new tech tools out there? Well, I've got something just for you. You can join me for a special webinar, Empowering Parents with AI, Tools and Strategies for Supporting Your Child's Learning. Now, this event will go into practical ways to use AI to help your child with homework, boost their creativity, and keep them ahead in today's digital world, all while ensuring they think independently. So, don't miss this chance to become the tech-savvy parent your child needs. Spots are limited, so use the link in the description to head over to the website and register for the webinar today.
Yeah, excellent. So, for example, let me outline a brief example. So let's say we have data from previous years, like students have been submitting, let's say there is like 5 rounds of exercises. They have been submitting these exercises and giving like some grades for each of the exercise, weekly exercise, and then they go to their final exam and also get the grade. Now, as an educator, what I can see next year is that, okay, now these students are on a right track. So I can kind of predict more or less. It's still a hypothesis generation, so it's not like for granted that they will get like a better grade at the final exam if they perform well in the previous exercises. But there is some hint that they might be doing well at the class. But at the same time, the educator with the visualization can see that, okay, some students are on the wrong track. And of course, if students themselves also see themselves like in the as part of the visualization, and kind of help them to also understand what might happen later on in the course if they don't like improve basically the commitment to submit better assignments to the system. So I mean, this is like a simple example of what the educator can do and how the educator can benefit from it, and how the whole class could also benefit.
Fantastic. I mean, and with this approach, because it is very much a unique approach as well, do you find that, again, that European classrooms and where you're going across this, do you find they're more open to this type of approach, to sharing information for students to see, for teachers to see, and potentially parents? Or are you finding that those classrooms are more open-minded, or do you find there's certain curriculums that are more closed off to this approach?
I think, that's a great question. I think what I've seen is that, first of all, students really appreciate openness, but of course there is law like GDPR and a lot of restrictions what we can actually share to others. But I think many things can be done also anonymously. So if the classroom is big enough, then anonymity is better like preserved. I would say the biggest challenges come from like really taking care of the privacy and like I said, GDPR. But then at the same time, not all countries seem to care about too much about privacy. So I think in those countries it's easier to handle. I would say also there is a big difference between disciplines, and I mean some disciplines are really very traditional, so they are not so used to workshopping with students and have this kind of power distance between the professor and the students. So I think there it might be very hard to introduce let's all see ourselves as part of this bigger picture, like where are we going. There are differences.
Yeah, I can imagine there are differences if you're going from the ages of 3 or 4 up to from then up to secondary, so the 11 to 18-year-olds, and even into universities, 18-year-old and beyond. It's very different. Like you mentioned, GDPR, like in terms of data protection and what students are willing to, or even want to, because you might have the freedom to share information, but then there's the emotional impact that sometimes it can have, and trying to remove this idea of a ranking system. And I've spoken with students who have previously gone through that. So having this idea or a wave of this imagery of how we are as a class and where are we going as a collective performance is a really nice approach to it. And also one of the things that you do a lot of, and I'm really interested in this, is to do with cross-disciplinary learning and future skills. And I'm a huge advocate for this. And I think we're seeing this shift. It's more at the forefront now. I think over the past 2 years or so post-COVID, we're seeing more people that are focusing on skills, even with AI coming into play, more people talking about skills. And obviously you've co-edited the design education across disciplines. What's your take on cross-disciplinary learning?
Yeah, so we co-edited that book because we were super interested in like what the design professors and professionals will say about designing education. And what we learned is that, first of all, there's like fantastic examples of designing whole programs, whole education system of a university, all the way through designing individual courses and individual learning experiences. So my take is that when we take this kind of design thinking approach, we can certainly do magical things to really create better learning experiences for students. What would be the alternative? I mean, basically following this kind of bureaucratic approach than only top-down rules and not really letting people to influence what kind of learning experiences they would like to offer to their students, or students themselves to influence what kind of learning experiences they should have.
And we're hearing this is a thing, it's coming around a bit more, so more webinars or things that I've been on about design thinking. Just to help to the listeners and for myself, simple summary, what is design thinking?
Design thinking, I think there is a few core things. So first of all, kind of accepting that draft versions are also pretty good, and accepting that when we work with this kind of iterative cycle to improve the drafts, then the end result will be better. And also the idea of working early on with the users of the kind of the product of the design process, and also following this kind of idea that we first generate like lot of ideas to a problem at hand or a design task at hand, and then having this kind of double diamond view of the process, where we then cut down the problem space, cut down the solution space, and then we select only a few of the possible solutions to improve. So I think it's like many of these little elements and components that contribute to somebody using design thinking as a method.
Yeah. Do you think then, because again, I've been trying to implement more of this year, and people who I talk with and connect with, trying to develop my own sort of pedagogy and professional practice with it. And I'm probably coming at it from one of the most rigid subjects to some extent. Science is very, and some subjects are. So from a design thinking, is it suitable for all subjects? Do you think it can be applied to all subjects, or are there some things that it works better with than others?
Well, I think design thinking can be applied to anything. So even very rigid subjects, the learning experience could be designed by following design thinking. Of course, then the question is like whether the actual math exercises, can be somehow help with design thinking. I'm not so sure about that, because I also went through the computer science mathematics degree for my master's. So I don't know. I think there is also a lot of need for actual work, right? So to understand something, but the learning experience itself can be certainly designed.
And that's what I was interested in, because obviously you're applying it for education. We're looking at it as a whole, and I'm interested in terms of, because you said it's like, the Finnish education system, we see there's problems, we want to solve problems. And obviously one of the terms we see in design thinking is this idea of a wicked problem. And I'm curious, in terms of what you've come across, have you seen any wicked problems in education, or anything you think, that's a problem?
I think there is so many wicked problems. So I mentioned already, like, how do we ensure that everybody in this world has a fair chance for getting educated? I think that is a wicked problem, super, super hard to solve. Almost, I'm not saying impossible, but I think we have to believe that it's possible, but it's certainly a wicked problem.
Yeah. And I think, again, it's the more people we can draw attention to that. Like we mention in different ways, and we talk about equity, we talk about equality, but it is that now. And like we're seeing more people talk about like access to technology, access to AI, should we have it? So it is that idea of an unknown. I'd say that's what a wicked problem is, the unknown part in terms of planning for the future, and trying to solve a problem before it arises.
Exactly.
And that's one of the things I like.
Yeah, exactly. And I wrote this speculative fiction book, Human, published it earlier this year, 2024. And I outlined also there are some wicked problems. And one of them, without spoiling too much, one of them being like, how much do we know as human beings about AI really? I mean, does anyone really understand what is going on? I mean, I did my PhD about AI, and I'm like, always like, okay, do I understand what is going on? There's always these new models. and they do more and more fantastic stuff on our behalf, but they still don't do our dishes. So I would like to do more writing, and I saw this one artist saying some time ago that why AI is not doing dishes, and so AI is doing writing that the human being would like to do. So I think there is a lot of wicked problems in AI in terms of education system.
Yeah, I can agree with problems. There's the ones that we see in front of us, and the ones that are, we say, round the corner that we don't see, that we don't know are coming, and taking the time to try and think about what they are, what they could be. And a guest I had on previously, Gemma Gwilym, made the interesting part about we're focusing a lot on student skills and student knowledge about how to use technology, that actually we could be missing a trick with how we're training adults or how we're training teachers about utilizing this technology. And all of a sudden you're going to get a generation, what are they called now? Gen Alpha, I think they call it, as whatever it may be, that have so many more skills than, the adults that have the Gen Zs, as it were, or Gen Xs, or I lose track of all the... But it was an issue that we've really got coming through. So it's something worthwhile to think about. But with that, I kind of, again, try and segue nicely into this, is the idea of, well, actually, that could be an interdisciplinary problem in terms of we kind of just see, we use technology, but actually we can utilize technology as a form of as a discipline in itself and bring it into a lot more different curriculum or different subjects. So I'm curious, for you, Side, who's someone who's obviously really passionate and an expert within this field, what are some of the things that you like or some of the different subjects that you like in terms of interdisciplinary, so different concepts or curricula that you like to bring together when teaching?
Yeah, so there is now I have my course Explorative Information Visualization at Aalto, and I think there were 106 signed up students coming from arts, business, computer science, information networks, engineering side. So really different kinds of disciplines. When we bring these disciplines together, it makes all the sense, because artists can bring the creativity and fantastic visual skills. Business people can bring a lot of critical thinking and also understanding of value. And then computer scientists, of course, they bring value in every fingertip when programming amazing stuff. So, and engineers can actually create machines that go around, right? And bring us to different places. So those are, for example, disciplines that I really, really like to bring together. And it's more for me transdisciplinary than interdisciplinary. I would say that one wicked problem is that we don't bring enough or we don't focus enough, I think, in the education system to solve the problems that the world actually needs to solve. We still focus on working in silos and with very traditional, almost like a toy level problems, unfortunately, in higher education and also at other levels as well.
I love the word you use there, going from interdisciplinary to transdisciplinary. So when you've got all these different discipline students in your theatre, your classroom, wherever it may be, what do you do? How do you get them to work together so that they're bringing out each other's skills and combining these ideas? What sort of activities do you get them to do?
Yeah, so you mentioned theater, and actually it's like a literal theater. It's called Mordor. I
was going to say like Lord of the Rings type of thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's this is what we call this classroom. It's like it's a splendid theater kind of space. You have to really fight to get this theater for your class, but I've been successful in doing that. So what I want to do there always with first of all, early on, bring people from different disciplines to work together in groups of 3 to 5, 7, and discuss first session, what are the topics, what they what they think is a topic that calls for visualizations to understand it more thoroughly. And also I make use of Sustainable Development Goals by United Nations, which is, I think, a great goal set of 17 SDGs that really students find valuable as a starting point, because they want to have this class as a channel for they not just worries but also solutions for understanding, like why are they worried and why world should be worried. And then I have a lot of ice-breaking activities. For example, I usually, like this year, we made a long line, having people at this side, like who are born or have a relation closest to Helsinki, and then at this sideline of the at this side of the line, people who are born from geographically furthest point, the furthest point from Helsinki. And this already is a visualization and brings people together and we understand, oh, we are not from the same place, right? Which is already like a creation of community. And then bring in like the most distant people together. And it's all these fun, but also I think community building activities, and that certainly bring trust to the classroom.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things. It's very clear that this idea of bringing people together or bringing different cultures, like we use transdiscipline, but it's very clear that that's something that's very passionate about and something that you try and integrate into obviously a lot of the work that you do. And so with that in mind and thinking ahead to the future of education, and now trying to bring it back into obviously this global experience, what do you think the future of education then is going to be like in terms of trying to incorporate what we're going to call cross-border collaborations?
Mm-hmm. I think one thing is clear. I mean, we have these global wicked problems. They won't go easily away. So I think one thing that we need to solve is like, how do we collaborate cross-border online, but not in a traditional online way, because we cannot simply move people around all the time physically. I mean, move there for physical mobility for 1.5 years. It's nice and ideal, and it can be done in many cases, but it's totally not feasible. So what we've been very excited about is a concept called cyber physical learning, meaning that like independent of whether you attend the learning experience from cyber worlds with the help of AI, augmented reality, virtual reality, projections, holograms, or whether you attend the experience like from a physical world or in a physical setup, then you would still get not exactly the same experience, but engaging and learning supporting experiences. And we created an alliance between Singapore University of Technology and Design and Zhejiang from China, Monterrey Tech Monterrey, and then Aalto University and many other universities, Ottawa University from Canada, Hong Kong University of Science and Technology as well, and so on. So this is a very nice alliance where we ideate and co-create together these models for cyber-physical learning. And we also established a journal gathering these different solutions and possible approaches and publishing them.
Amazing. Can you just share like one or two of the insights that you've got from this sort of global collaboration?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, for example, we are super excited about telepresence robot that Singapore University of Technology and Design has been creating. So the idea there is that you have this kind of telepresence robot, like a device that the student from online can make use of and can, for example, project their works on the table so that others can add on it. Of course, then you need a paper below the projection, and then the student like elsewhere can also see the result, like how the group work is doing. So you see, it's like going beyond like a traditional online means where everybody's accessing the same, you name it, online canvas and then drawing there.
I've got like visions of Tony Stark with like holograms coming up in real time.
Exactly.
That's fantastic.
Exactly, wow. Exactly. And also when you mentioned hologram, Tech Monterrey, they created this hologram professor where the idea is that there is like, of course, it's an illusion of a hologram professor, but it looks really real. I saw it back in January in Mexico. And we are now having, with my student, a fantastic project on identifying like the movements of people in a classroom, and then helping to interact with visualizations just with your hands and body movements. And of course, imagination is the limit. What you can do with it.
Excuse me. Yeah, exactly. I'm blown away with this in terms of just thinking about. Because what I like about this, because my instant question as a teacher would be, what's the outcome? What's the goal? And the reality is, from what I'm thinking in my own head, it's like, well, there is none. It's just for the betterment of, it's just for progress. It literally just sounds like it's for progress. And that for me is like you say, we've got problems in the fact that we're sometimes in certain countries, in certain curriculums, we are too caught up on very linear, right? What grades did you get? It's very finite. Education is seen as finite, where actually progress is infinite, and actually the things that we're integrating in this global collaboration of sharing ideas instead of, I can't think what the correct term is, but safeguarding them to some extent. I think that's wonderful. I think it's inspired me to think about which schools around the world could I reach out to do other work in sciences, or just for, cultural or global exchanges, just because there's no other reason, but just because it's fantastic.
Exactly.
So I'm curious, like for me, who's getting very interested in this, like, what would be your sort of 3 actions for educators, be it in, let's say, it could be university, could be in secondary school like myself? What would be your kind of takeaways or actions that I need to be doing to probably get started with something like this?
Well, 3 things easy to list. So I would really look at design fiction. It's basically like design thinking, but about future, like let's imagine that 30, 50 years from now, and this is what I've been doing in my class and also with my writings a lot, and then let's imagine. Now, of course, we can be wrong, right? But I'm pretty sure that some things might go even right. So really be visionary about how the education might look like in 50 years from now, how the world would look like 50 years from now. And then secondly, I would also look carefully all these grand challenges and bigger problems, as you said, like challenges, problems that the world is actually facing. And then thirdly, really compare the current curricula education system of a given university or department, school, country, whatever level you are working at, and then see if we are missing the boat, like when we are related to this design fiction or about the future, or we are comparing it to grand challenges, and what kind of transdisciplinary approaches those might need.
Yeah, and I think you're right. The thing when you say about like this fiction, my mind instantly goes back, because I think about AI at the moment, to like the 1984, I think it was, Terminator. Yeah. And everyone's like, 40, what are we now, 40 years? Yeah, 40 years on. And which in the time frame of technology, 40 years for some changes, it seems quite big now. At the time it's not. If you think about then these changes in technology and improvements are getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. So, from when the first iPhone came out in 2007 to where we are now with what they can do, that's going to be much smaller. So this idea of, it's science fiction, it'll never happen. I think Dubai and some in the near future want to have flying cars. So instead of being taxied around, you're going to get into a flying car that could be completely automated. These things are not, if you might think it's fiction right now, in months it could be, or in a few years' time, it may not be. So I think that's a really good piece of advice to be thinking about in terms of what appears as fiction, but actually could be a really good problem or initiative to focus on. Great place to get started. I want to finish then with more of a lighthearted question for you, and we've been doing this a lot on the podcast in terms of asking people in terms of their thoughts for the future, in terms of if they could do one thing, design one thing, what would it be? So for you, if you could design an interdisciplinary or global challenge for students from around the world, what would it look like, and what skills would you focus on?
I would pose a challenge like, how do we make the world a more human place? And by saying more human place, I also mean nature, biodiversity, because having all that actually makes the earth more human place. Just imagine human beings without all the domestic animals or wild animals, or without all the nature. It would be a very non-human place, I would say.
I think that's a great one to finish with. And what I like is, considering all the technology, all the different things we've spoken about, the idea of human flourishing is actually at the core of everything. I think that's a great a great challenge, and one I hope a lot of teachers out there are actually focusing on at the moment, because it's like you say, that really is a real world problem. So a great way to finish, Tomi. Thank you so much for coming on and speaking with me today about all things sort of Nordic education, into technology based, into interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary. I'm going to start using that term a lot more now. I love it. It's been insightful for me, and I'm leaving this kind of inspired and with ideas and visions for the future. So for me, it's been a fantastic conversation and a real opportunity to learn. And I really appreciate you coming on and speaking with me today.
Alex, thanks for having me. It was great pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you.